Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Gose.
And I'm Jenny Field. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. Now, first of all, I'm quite excited this week because we've had our first snowfall in the UK. And I don't know whether you've had any over there yet, but we get very excited over here because it doesn't settle, but it's a big flurry. And it was really, I nearly said a rude word then, and it was really cold this week. We get excited about snow. Have you had snow yet? I feel like you're probably...
We did get a little bit in Indianapolis, but it was kind of like fake winter because it got cold and it snowed and then it warmed back up and then it all melted. And we don't get as excited about it. It's more of a sense of doom of like, what are we in store for the rest of the... Because technically It's not winter yet. But thankfully we have not had much. It actually kind of came on as a bit of a surprise when we got it.
I think it's caught us a little bit this week, but I get quite excited. The other thing I want to celebrate this week is this arrived in the post for me, for those that are watching on YouTube, which is my shortlist certificate for my book. In the Business Book Awards, it was a shortlist for the leadership finalist, and my publisher sent me this and it arrived today. So that's exciting.
Where are you hanging it? Do you have a spot for it?
Well, where I've got the sign behind me that says she's mad, but she's magic, I have a whiteboard next to this, which, as we've discussed off podcast, I don't really use, and there's stuff on it from September. So I want to get rid of that and create a little gallery wall and put it up there. So that's my plan.
Love it. Congratulations again.
Thank you. I'm very, very pleased. I'm celebrating that win. So what are the articles for this week? What have you got for us?
Yes. Before we get into some Gallup research on the purpose at work, other stories I picked kind of feel like symptoms of the same thing. We've got Kate O'Neill arguing people don't really need feedback or more feedback. They need shared context. We've got Mita Malik saying not every fire is yours to fight as a leader. And then there's an Economist piece on AI trying to read your personality from your face. We're going to get into, first, Gallup and Stand Together's new Power of Purpose study finds that when people feel strong purpose at work, 50% of them are engaged. When purpose is low, that drops to 9%, with only 31% of U.S. workforce engaged overall. Purposeful workers are also far less likely to feel burned out or be job hunting. Yet, leaders massively underweight it. Just 30% of hiring managers say a strong sense of personal purpose and passion for the mission is very important to success in a role, compared with 77% who say communication skills are important. At the same time, 45% of workers say they're mainly working for pay and benefits, and only 10% feel their current job has a purpose they truly believe in, even though more say that's where they want more in an ideal job. So you've got this gap. Purpose clearly moves the needle on engagement, burnout, and retention, but it's treated like this soft extra instead of a design principle for jobs, conversation, and recognition. So Jenny, for you, when this data is this loud about purpose, what do you think stops leaders from treating it as a core performance lever rather than this fluffy nice to have?
I love these stats and insight, and I really enjoyed the personal purpose and passion because that was
that was a lot. That was a lot.
I enjoyed that immensely. So I think this is ignored because it's the hard work. Like, I think it's easy to focus in on tactics, or it's easy to just focusing on the stuff that you should be doing. But if that isn't linked to purpose, it is, the data shows it's really hard to kind of get behind that. I think purpose is quite a loaded word for executives and leaders. I think sometimes it gets lost in that sort of weighted meaning. Actually, what we're talking about purpose is meaningful work, is, why are we doing what we're doing? What's that reason behind it? But I think the word purpose sometimes makes people feel like you can't have a purpose if you're a for-profit organisation that isn't doing all of this work to improve society. So I think purpose as a word can stop people. I also think it's the hard work that leaders need to do that they push to the bottom because they don't feel that they need it. I think they feel like there's still this view of, I'm just going to tell people what to do and they're just going to do it. And I don't think they believe some of this data, if I'm honest. I think that's probably what's behind it.
I think what surprises me is that 30%, and this isn't of leaders necessarily, like high up C-suite, this is hiring managers, say that strong sense of purpose and passion is very important. That is a signal to me saying to them, we talked about last week, is it just a job?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is showing hiring managers are saying, this is just a job. Just do the things that we think you need to do. Whether you feel this greater sense of purpose or passion, we don't care. We don't think it's that important. I think that just feels like, maybe it's not a miss. I was going to say that feels like a miss. Maybe it's not a miss. Maybe it just shows that some of these jobs are just jobs, no matter which side of the coin you're on.
Yeah. There's the percentage about communication skills. Let's just go back to that, because I feel like there's a link between that and the purpose as well. So the data said that, can we go? I'm just going to go through that. So the data said that 77% said communication skills were very important to success in a role. This was hiring managers, 77% of hiring managers, I think. Yeah. And so for me, there is a correlation between purpose and communication skills, which is probably entirely unfounded. But I feel that if you can articulate that purpose and you can communicate that message, that is, 100% of the issue. So is it that is it that there's no purpose, or is it that there's poor communication about the purpose that's the issue? And I've got a question about that, I think.
I get a sense it's more of that personal purpose, that I know why I'm here. And I think that other data point around that 45% of workers say they're mainly working for pay and benefits. That's a bit of that, just a job, not in a negative way, but that's a bit of that. And I remember this colleague I had at Rolls-Royce used to kind of joke that it is a job, because he would say if all of a sudden the next day Rolls-Royce stopped paying everybody, most people aren't going to show up.
Yeah.
He's like, there might be a few crazy people out there that still come in because they don't really know what else to do. But most of us aren't going to show up the next day if we're not getting paid. Again, that is that point. We've talked about it, that most companies are out there to profit, out there to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's just call it out what it is.
Yeah.
And if hiring managers are seeing this as a job, then perhaps employees should treat it just as that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got so many thoughts about the whole just a job thing. It's really stayed with me. Even this week, I was at a Gallup event. Actually, they were talking about engagement just in the UK, which I'll share in a future episode. But this whole just a job thing and engagement and how we measure how people feel at work. And I have so many mental Post-it notes about this that I just need to try and gather together, because I just think there's just so many layers to this that we could really delve into on here.
Next, we've got a LinkedIn post that I saw from Kate O'Neill. She closes out, quote, unpopular opinion, nobody needs feedback. What we actually need is a shared context for how we're working together. This post breaks feedback into certain pieces, saying without patterns, it's just noise. Without psychological safety, it's surveillance. Without shared goals, it reflects the giver's preferences more than the quality of the work. Her argument is that feedback works only when it sits inside a clearly defined operating system for the team. What we're trying to do, how we make decisions, and what quote unquote good looks like. Otherwise, you get one-off judgments, performance whiplash, and a lot of confusion dressed up as quote unquote development. For communicators, that's a nudge to look more upstream. Maybe the problem isn't that employees can't handle feedback, but that nobody has put it in the work to create that shared context at all. For you, Jenni, if you take Kate's view, what's the first thing leaders and comms teams should fix? The way they give feedback or the way they define and communicate the context?
The way they define and communicate context. So I agree with Kate, and it's reminded me of my best friend, Advita Patel, who was on stage recently saying, I don't want people's feedback. And I'm kind of here for that. Like, I don't want feedback from everybody, but I want feedback from the people who are doing the work and that I respect and listen to. I'm not a fan of people that just come over and just give you feedback. What this has also reminded me of is the book Inclusion on Purpose, which is by Rashika, and her surname escapes me, but she has a great framework in there called SBI, which is Situation, Behaviour, Impact for Giving Feedback. I'll pop it in a LinkedIn post from us on Frequency after this episode's out, because it's a really good framework. And that is the context. If you don't have that, there's so much bias and stuff that can come into that feedback that isn't just or fair, unless you can talk about the impact that that person's behavior or the work has had. It's just opinion. And that's horrible. And I know so many people that experience that. I know so many people of all walks of life that experience feedback of things like, well, we don't think you had enough gravitas to do this. Like, what? Like, what does that even mean? Like, and I can't do anything with that. Like, what's the outcome you want by giving me the feedback? So I'm absolutely in the context first, and then the way you give the feedback needs to be discussed. Are you the same or other way around?
Well, I'm going to give a little plug for Ecology's mentorship program. We've launched that for 2026, so people want to be part of a mentorship program. The reason I share that is I was a mentor in a previous year to a mentee, and she really struggled with some feedback that a leader gave her. And somebody said this to me, they're like, sometimes feedback is just feedback. So if you've ever had to hold a microphone too close to a speaker and you get that noise, that's feedback. And it's not good and it's not helpful. And I think sometimes a lot of this feedback it's from sources you don't want in context that is irrelevant to you. I've had to be clear with some people who I know who like to give feedback, especially like after an event that I've hosted or something. I'll say like, I already know what I could have done better. I already know what I did well. You don't need to tell me anything. Next week, give me some ideas on new things we can do. I don't need it right away. Because I think sometimes it's the timing is perhaps the most important part of that context. Sometimes it's way too soon. Sometimes it's way too late. It's finding that balance, a bit of a Goldilocks thing here, about finding that sweet spot right in the middle.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's reminded me of when I did Comms Reboot in Toronto in the summer, and I said to you, I'm going to ask for your feedback, and I'm probably going to do it on the day, and I'm okay with that. So just let me know. I remember us having a little chat over some drinks, because a bit like you, I know what I could have done better, but I also wanted your feedback. Like, you're somebody who I want to hear from and respect and want to get that. Whereas I think if somebody else had come over and just said, oh, do you know, this was not great, I'd be like, jog on. Not interested in what you got to say.
Well, I think that's where it's almost like there's consent that I think is good here, that to ask people, do you want feedback on this? And if they say no, then don't give it. But if they say yes, then that's your permission to provide it. The unsolicited part, I think, is often the problem.
I feel like there's a whole meme now around consent for feedback that we can do.
There is.
I can see your brain is already going there.
Yeah. Next up, Mina Malik's post on LinkedIn is a love letter to boundaries, which we've talked about a lot. Quote, not every fire is yours to fight, and not every hero story ends well. She points out that leaders who rush into every crisis end up exhausted, resentful, and less effective. And they accidentally train their teams to escalate everything instead of solving problems at the right level. Her bigger point is cultural. Many workplaces still reward the firefighter myth. The leader who works late, answers every ping, rescues every messy project, that looks noble, but it hides poor planning and broken systems. Protecting your energy and saying no is framed not as selfishness, but as part of your job as a leader. For IC and HR, this touches the stories we amplify. Do we celebrate sustainable leadership and clear expectations, or only the dramatic heroics when things go wrong? Jenni, how can we start to shift the stories we tell so that boundaries and the sustainable leadership are celebrated as much as that hero saving the day?
I think it's a really great point. I always say, is it a hill you want to die on? Which I've had to learn myself about all the things you're kind of going to fight. I think this shift in the stories has to align to the values and the culture. I think that the bigger point is cultural, I think, is huge here. And how are you telling the stories about the values that demonstrate the behaviours that you want to see? And I think that is really important to share. I also think this is way more kind of micro than maybe the whole organisation. I think this is down to leaders and managers in their teams to recognise and celebrate the right behaviours and the things that support the boundaries and that sustainable leadership piece. I think this is really important, actually, when we're looking at burnout, we're looking at well-being and the correlation of that to how people feel at work. And I think we probably need to make this a bit of a priority going into next year for internal communicators around how do we really celebrate and shine a light on the behaviors that we want to see in this culture, rather than focusing so much on the things that are bad. And actually maybe that positive spin will help us reframe some of it as well.
I like that she brings in this firefighter myth of the people who kind of let things get bad and dangerous, so they come in and kind of save the day, and that's ultimately then what people see. And I think that's then the fault of a lot of recognition of, you see these people do these big heroic efforts. Well, maybe part of that heroicism was because they were the villain. Maybe they let things get to a point that they had to come in and save the day. What about the people who don't let it get to that point? And you see people, whether it's, they let things get to a point where you have to apply heroic efforts to save it.
Yeah.
They don't have boundaries. We've talked about that in the past with recognition, that the people that are kind of the always on mentality are the ones that get recognized. Well, that's honestly treating the wrong or celebrating the wrong behavior. So I like that. We should own more of that. We should look at the people who don't have to save the day all the time as the model that we should be recognizing more and more. And finally, we've got The Economist looks at a new working paper where researchers ran facial analysis models on LinkedIn photos of tens of thousands of MBA grads, using AI to infer big 5 personality traits and link them to outcomes like pay, seniority, and promotions. The unsettling headline is, those AI inferred traits had real predictive power for career and salary outcomes, roughly on par with factors like school prestige. One of the most striking findings is that the pay gap between people with quote-unquote advantageous photo-based traits and those without is huge, bigger than the black-white pay gap for men, and a large share of it for women, according to the commentary on the study. It points to a bit of a dystopian scenario where your face isn't just a biometric identifier, but a proxy for potential used by recruiters and algorithms, with all that bias that implies. For culture, trust, and inclusion, this is a bit of a nightmare cocktail. Tools sold as objective efficiency boosters could hardwire new forms of discrimination, increase employees' sense of being constantly judged, and undermine all the work leaders say they're doing on fairness and belonging. Jenni, when leadership gets excited about AI tools that quote-unquote promise better hiring through facial or behavioral analysis, how would you advise communicators to frame the ethical and cultural risks without being written off as anti-tech?
I mean, this is a bit terrifying, isn't it? Like, all I can think about is how we've tried to get to a place where we are doing almost like blind recruitment. So we take off, names and things that could be triggers for people's biases, so that you're looking at something without that coming in order to make sure that you're making decisions based on the individual, not, what they look like or what school they've been to or what their name is. This feels like it's going backwards. And I think for me, your question about kind of how do you deal with this without being anti-tech has to be in the questions that you're asking, and the curious questions you're asking about the impact this has in a way that's talking about the outcome you're trying to achieve rather than sounding negative. So if somebody wants to use this, and we've got a policy or a strategy, as everyone should have, about making sure that our hiring process is inclusive, then my question would be, how does this follow that? Like, how does this make that better? And I think that's all you have to do. I think you just have to have some really good questions that point out the danger and the risk here, because that danger and risk is huge. I'm hoping there's not an option where we can just all run our faces through it and it tells us, because I don't want to do that.
I think this is where it's that challenge of, the taller you are, the more white you are, the more male you are. There is proof that impacts salary, promotions, all of those things. All this continues to show is that AI is just as biased as people are. It is going to, again, the schools people go to has an impact, but even then only to a degree. But you can't change, I guess you can sort of change what you look like, but you can't change certain elements of who you are. And I think this just shows that the more we rely on the judgment side, that's the human element. And I heard this AI talk recently where he talked about, where AI has value versus the human value. And he talks about the bottlenecks, like where were the bottlenecks? And for so long, it was around writing code. That was the bottleneck for companies to continue developing because that took a lot of time and a specialty to do it. Well, AI has cleaned through that bottleneck now. The next bottleneck is judgment. And that's something that the human element right now is superseding AI. But in a lot of these cases, we're letting AI make those judgment calls, especially in hiring and recruiting. I'm seeing that from my college members who are talking about submitting for a job and getting rejection within minutes. No human looked at that, but a judgment call is being made. And I think that's the danger here with using tools like this.
Yeah. And I think we have to think about the broader implications that has on society as a whole, like without getting sort of too deep, but if there's no human interaction and you're rejected, and we are social beings who need to belong and feel safe, and you're looking, and that's happening again and again and again and again, and that impact that has on how you feel about other people, because you're being rejected again and again, and it feels unjust and unfair, and you just want to talk to a person, and that impact on you as a person, and then how that sort of seeps out into everyday relationships, life, all of those things, I think is part of the problem we've got now in terms of where people feel more stressed, they feel more sad, they feel less hope. Like this, automation that we have in the world is not helping us come together and be human and find that community and belonging that we all need and crave. And I don't think we think about that long-term implication on, let's just get some tech in here that can help us sift through 200 applications. Can see the logic, but the application is having quite a deep impact, I think, on us as a human race.
It's sort of accomplishing one goal, but not the ultimate goal. So in this case, if you want to hire the right person, great, that's the goal. And if you want to speed things up, which is more important? Is it to speed things up, or is it to hire the right person? If it's to speed things up, you're not going to get the right person.
Yeah.
But if you get the right person, you're not going to speed things up.
Yeah. But I think there's also something about maybe starting to introduce like an unintended consequences conversation. Let's have that conversation. Like what's the things that could happen if we do this, and create space for that? Because I think we're moving so quickly that we're not stopping to think about those unintended consequences. And I think if we don't start to catch that now with the pace of technology, then I think there is going to be some damage longer term. And I think we have a duty, not as communicators or HR professionals or leaders, but I think we as human beings have a duty to come together and put in that judgment and check and balance to make sure that we're not anti-tech, but we are mindful of the impact technology is going to have on human beings and how we can do that ethically, responsibly, and for the long term.
Yeah, I think you can be critical of tech without being anti-tech. That wraps up the articles for this week, Jenni. I am curious next, what are you freaking out about?
So my freak out this week is actually very joyous, because I know sometimes mine can be my little rant. But I saw a post this week from Andrew Hubbard, who is a senior director of communications at Populo. And he wrote a post which just filled me with so much joy. So he basically was saying that he'd recently done a session, a masterclass on measurement. And he says in his post, I don't really feel like a master of anything, but I got some feedback and it's really made my day. And he shared some of those comments. He very kindly also tagged me in his post, just saying kind of these are the real masters, along with a few other folks, which was lovely. But what I enjoyed about that was somebody taking a moment to reflect on their own courage and vulnerability doing something, and then the positive feedback that came, and then sharing that, because it was just really nice to see someone saying, do you know what, I did a thing and I was uncomfortable, but I had some really good feedback, and actually I feel really great now and this has been lovely. And you don't see much of that on LinkedIn, and it filled my cup reading it for him, and I just think more people should be doing that, because I think it's lovely.
Yeah, we had an ecology member who once posted in the community, and she was like, I'm going to take a page out of Chuck Gose's book and brag about something I did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hope that's the page you take out of my book. I want people, like you said, to celebrate themselves more. If I could offer Andrew a piece of advice, which he did not ask for.
So you're going to give him feedback that he doesn't need.
Right, exactly. is to just own it. We don't even need to self-deprecate the first part of saying, well, I didn't really think no, like now you know that. Own it.
Yeah.
Like people really enjoyed it. Like celebrate that. We don't have, there's this weird sort of self-deprecating humble brag element to it, right? Rather people say, man, I was nervous about doing this.
Yeah.
I was happy to do it. Look at this amazing feedback I got. I can't wait to do like the next one. But there's still this little bit of us that we have to hold back and not just let it all out. But I love that. I wish people would celebrate their successes more. We say in our house, like you should always even celebrate the little things. Mm-hmm. So our I guess code in our house is elaborate and unnecessary. Mm-hmm. We think there are not enough things in life that are elaborate and unnecessary, so we celebrate in that way. So Andrew, congratulations for that. Keep owning your successes. I'm going to be the negative one this time, Jenny.
Phew.
We might have talked about this in past episodes, but I'm actually wondering, do people enjoy working in comms? Because half of the LinkedIn posts that I'm reading are people saying, nobody believed blah, blah, blah. Nobody understands blah, blah, blah. Like I just, or it's complaining. I just wonder, like, where is the positivity? Maybe this is where we're looking for Andrew on here. Like, where's the positivity? I want to see more positivity and less like columnists. I feel like every LinkedIn post is like a column, like an editorial opinion column about something that's happening out there, and the world is actually falling apart. That we do know. But from an industry and comms and professional standpoint, like, where's the positivity? I just don't see a lot of it. And I'm a little freaking out about it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm laughing because I feel like about 3-4 months ago, I had the same freak out of like, what's going on? But I also think there are people that are posting some of the negative stuff for the reactions and the engagement. And I think it's that stuff that gets the people piling on, because we love to pile on to negativity. Misery loves company, right? Like, I think there is a bit of that. But I actually have taken a leaf out of your book of a list of people that I am going to talk about across LinkedIn over the next sort of year or so, who I really want to celebrate and recognize, because I think we need more positivity. But I do think if you're listening to this and you work in comms, post something on LinkedIn about that's been brilliant about your week or your month or this year, and tag us in it so we can start to see some joy.
Yeah, have a positive freak out and celebrate those things. We need more of that and feel comfortable in bragging. Mm-hmm. Thank you all for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes, and please do not forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can also find Frequency on YouTube. Thank you to my friend Poet Ali for contributing music to the show. We're back every Monday with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.